Okay, so on the back of the motor there are 4 screws, Phillips screwdriver. I've already pre-loosened those up, so I'm going to take those all out, put those in a place for safekeeping. So now we can take our motor off. Well, other than you got a couple little clips here. If we need to pop them loose, this one here, no, didn't want to do that. Just going to see if it's going to be easier to take off the one on the motor here, but that looks like it's a little cover to get at the wiring. So I'm going to slide that sucker back on. Nope, I want that one off. So we're going to have to get this clip off, and we can take this motor off. Okay, so this is just on one of those Christmas tree clips, so I kind of pound on it a little bit. And if you happen to have one of these little pry tools, just something, get under that clip and just pop out that Christmas tree clip. I don't know if there's a correct way to pop them out other than forcing them, but now it's off. So now we can look at our motor, and everything inside here looks good. We got a little gasket here, and everything's lubed up. It doesn't look like the motor itself has any corrosion inside it. All looks good, but like I say, it's going to be in this shaft that we're going to try and pop that shaft out and take a look at it and see if we have corrosion up inside this shaft, which I'm almost sure we do. So now I'm going to take a few of these pieces out. This pivot arm, just kind of lift that up and out. You might want to make sure you keep your orientation. Yeah, they have different size shafts, so it'll idiot proof it when it goes back into assembly. But when you do assemble it, you're going to have to get the timing out between the gears to get the spacing just right for those. So I'm just going to set that off to the side here. I'll pry out this big plastic gear here. Pop him out. He's got a little spring washer behind him, and there's where our electrodes hit. So I'm going to give them clean them up. Do not lose that spring washer. That's going to be very important piece not to lose. Set him down. Another big metal gear over here actually drives the motor. Pull him off. He too has a spring washer, so do not lose that one. Set him down. And then we have the piece going up into the shaft. I'm going to have to work on that a minute to figure out how I get that out. Here is a sticker with the model number for the motor, another sticker, and then this was the 23mm wrench on the nut that held it on the outside of the Mountaineer. Alright, well, I'm back to trying to get the shaft out of the housing, and I really didn't know how it was held in there. And I watched another video where a guy said there was some collar in here that held it, and you had to pound it past that collar to get it out. And said there was some cheap plastic cover here on top that held it. Well, mine was so corroded with rust, I couldn't tell what was going on. So I stacked up a bunch of washers and a nut, put on top of the shaft, put a piece of wood under it, and started pounding. And all of a sudden I heard little pieces go flying everywhere. Well, unbeknownst to me, on this shaft is there's a little tiny recessed collar in there on this wiper shaft. So on this model anyway, this is a Trico. I don't know if this is original OEM wiper, if it's been replaced at some point, but so they don't always just pound out. This one had a little slip collar on there, and I don't know if you can see this, but now I've shattered the top piece of this cast housing. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this work or not, but the way the assembly went is you have an O-ring which went on this gear, and then there was another little slip collar, little tiny metal slip collar here. That went on, and I couldn't even see that one. I mean, it looks nice and shiny right now, but I couldn't even see that. That must have been recessed on top of this housing, this cast housing or something. I couldn't even see that one. And then there's this little tiny, almost like a horseshoe clip, but it's not, you're not going to push it off sideways. It has to come off in line with the shaft. You would have to, and I saw that on there, but it didn't register to me that that was going to be a clip. I just thought, it was all rust. I just thought it was maybe a little shouldered bushing that popped out or something. Well, that one went over the top of the shaft and shoved down until it slipped into that collar. So don't go pounding on these right away to get them out. Look for this type of assembly in order to get your shaft out. Little slip collar. But once all that came apart, then I can show you this shaft now. Now that shaft freely comes out, and it actually, it spins in there pretty well. It's free spinning. So I don't know what was binding up so bad, unless it was all around the top. If there was a big just piece of corrosion of rust all around the top of that collar that was binding it up. But if you look at this shaft, it's got it rides on a raised shoulder here, then it's recessed in the middle. It's machined out about 20 thousandths, and then you have another little raised bushing, and then another recess, and so those ride inside here. And this is inside the shaft is a totally smooth bore, and it looks fine. And like I say, this goes right back in, and it spins nice and easy and free. So I'm thinking, what was binding this one up was a bunch of rust and corrosion on top of this housing all around the slip collar. I mean, like I say, there was this shiny metal piece, and I didn't even see that when I looked at this. And I wire brushed this, I PB blastered it, I wire brushed it, it just all looked rusty. So I don't know how that was hiding in there, and I never seen it. It must have been under a whole bunch of rust. So keep in mind on some of these windshield wiper models for that slip collar. So I don't know what I'm going to do now. if I go buy I can go buy a remanufactured unit for $50, or I don't know if I have enough thread here left to put my jam nut back on there and reassemble this thing. Maybe I can take a file and some sandpaper and flat top that off. But I have to get that. The only thing that holds the shaft in place is this snap ring holding it against the top of this tower, along with the O-ring and that other collar. So I'm gonna try it. I got nothing to lose, to try and file this level. And I don't know, whatever I do, it probably won't hold up to the water and the weather, but it doesn't have to last forever. So that's the inside of the windshield washer rear motor on a 2002 Mountaineer, if it's stock OEM. I'm not even sure. So I'll get back when I get it all put back together. Okay, I've taken my housing and filed it as flat as I could, cleaned it up, and then you can see a little bevel in there. I took a 3/4 drill bit and just kind of chamfered that inside surface. My plan is I went to the hardware and I bought a thicker O-ring, and I just put that bevel on there to give it some kind of a seat, best I can. And so that's going to be my stack up right there. I've already kind of dry fit it because I had to get the height just right with the lock ring on there to hold it in position. So all I'm waiting for now is my silicone lubricant to show up. I'm just going to clean it up, lube everything, put it back together, and hopefully she works. I'm going to put my shaft on. I bought a fatter O-ring. These were a couple of rubber washers that I just kind of trimmed down so that they fit on top of here, and the jam nut can still go over the top of them. So my whole stack up is just going to be a bunch of rubber. That way it won't have a whole, little give to it. And then the metal seat ring, and then the snap clip go back on, and we'll get that back on, and hopefully I still have, it's tall enough to go through the door after I reassemble it. Put it all back on, and don't forget all your pieces here. This piece here, that's got a groove in it, so that lines up to line it up, and that's got a angle on it, so it matches the angle on the door to go through the door square. Then there's this little rubber boot for sealing the inside. Then that goes through the door, and if you look at this piece, it has another bevel to it on the outside. That will go back on, and there should be a metal washer here somewhere. Right here. And the metal washer, which for the jam nut to hit against. I don't know if maybe I'll hunt down a new washer. I'll reuse that one, but that goes on. Then my jam nut. So that'll be my stack up back through the door, and then I'm sure it'll work. It'll just be a matter of how good my stack up seals out the water. Okay, I've put my shaft back in, added my stack up like I showed before, and got that spring clip on. That was a little bit of work getting that to seat right, because it, after being popped on and off, that spring clip lost a little bit of its memory. So just work it in to get it to stay. You can see now my gear moves freely, and now it's time to reassemble. I've pre-lubed all the inside guts and my gears over here. So I'm going to start with these spring clips. I'm going to put them the bow side up, put those back on the shafts. Greasy. Then I'm going to put my plastic gear back in. And then keep in mind you've got this linkage bar that has to spread across the two gears. So you're going to have to get these gears in just the right spot in order for this linkage bar to be in the right spot. And that is going to need to be lubed up also. So I've bought some silicone grease. That's what I've been using to lube everything up. And I just found this on Amazon. Just silicone lube compound, like 10 bucks for a big tube. Alright, and then time for the metal gear. Oops. Now that has a little recessed edge here. That's going to go face down. And this may be a little bit of trial and error to get it on the right tooth in order for these to line up. So, yep, I'm just a little bit off. These little pick tools are handy, so you can pop that gear right back out. So it likes to go right back in. I'll try a couple teeth over. I think there. That's got it. So now everything is back together. I greased everything up pretty well. I put grease in all the gears all around. Cleaned out the old grease, anything that looked dirty. And now it'll just be a matter of putting it back together. And don't forget your gasket. Gasket's going to go back on here. It's got a couple little locating pins to keep it in line. And screw your backing plate back on. I might put a little bit more grease on here, put this all back together, and then I'm going to try just hooking it up to battery and see how she runs. Okay, so now I've hooked some leads up to a battery. I pulled the two leads off my motor here, hooked up my ground. We're going to hook up some power. And that's how she works. Go back and forth. Look here, here's our shaft going. I just think my initial problem was just so much corrosion up around this shaft that it just didn't want to spin well. But now she's working. So now we can put the plate back together and just reassemble the same way you took everything apart. Alright, here it is, all reinstalled. Try to see if I can show you. Maybe you can see a little bit. You can see the silicone in there under this cover. Just make sure when you put this thing back together, the little rubber grommet on the inside, fill that full of silicone. Make sure you fill that whole gap up in the glass where the rubber comes through. Fill that up with silicone and put a layer on this outside piece with silicone, because when you tighten up that 23 millimeter, well, it's actually a 20 millimeter jam nut. When you tighten that up, it bottoms out, so it can't get too tight on the glass. So you really need to make sure that you do a good job getting silicone behind it, in and around the hole, and a little layer on the outside, and put this all back together. Again, I'll show you here. This thing just kind of pivots out and comes off. And make sure you get your windshield wiper. Just try and get it level with the rear window. And I just put some fresh WD-40 on here, lubed her up again. Okay, I'll watch your work. Go ahead. Turn the key all the way forward till all the lights come on. There it is. Squirt the water. There's the new water spout. So she's back in working order. So I figured I was better sticking with fixing it and using the OEM motor instead of buying a cheap $50–$60 replacement.